Welcome to the deep dive. You know, it feels like so often you and I were just trying to navigate this really complex landscape.
Hmm.
We're juggling the relentless demands of work, trying to squeeze in time for our own well-being, and at the same time just wading through this massive flood of information that hits us every single day.
Yeah, it's endless.
It really is. And it can feel almost impossible sometimes to truly lock in, you know,
Yeah.
to find that deep focus and actually thrive with all that noise going on. I think we've all been there, right? Trying to optimize everything, and sometimes it just feels like you're spinning your wheels, always a step behind.
Absolutely. That feeling, that constant push and pull between wanting to be productive, wanting to be healthy, but just being pulled in so many different directions.
Hmm.
That's almost a defining thing about modern life, isn't it?
It really is.
And it makes you ask that question, what does it really mean to be locked in today in this world that demands so much? Is it just about the hours you put in, or is it something, deeper?
Exactly. And that, listener, that's our mission today. We're
Yeah.
going on a pretty unique deep dive here. We're pulling insights from this incredibly candid, really raw, sometimes stream of consciousness, personal reflection that someone shared.
Right.
It's like this unfiltered window into their day-to-day life, their own self-observations, their personal philosophies on productivity, the whole science of dopamine, which is fascinating, and even how their habits are changing around digital stuff versus, actual physical media.
And what's so compelling about this source, I think, is just how authentic it feels. It's not some polished self-help guru telling you what to do.
No, definitely not.
It's more like a genuine, sometimes even contradictory account of someone really grappling with these modern challenges, like in real time.
Mm.
It gives you this rare look into the internal monologue, Someone trying to figure out how to optimize their day and dealing with the wins and the struggles.
Yeah, it really is like getting temporary access inside someone's head, watching their thought process unfold. And what you can expect today, as we kind of navigate this very personal story, is we're going to break down some surprising ideas about what productivity really looks like.
Mm-hmm.
We'll get a unique perspective on managing personal health conditions that really impact daily habits. And there's this really strong argument for why maybe some ways we consume media are just inherently more valuable than others.
Yeah, finding those little aha moments.
Exactly. Those moments hidden in the everyday stuff, not in some grand theory.
Wow.
So yeah, let's really unpack this. Okay, so let's start with this really striking observation from the source material.
Yeah.
The speaker mentions, watching this Twitter video, just a short clip, but it sparked something.
Right.
In the video, people were going up to guys in the gym, like really jacked, muscular guys, and asking them a simple question. How many hours do you work a week? And the answer, pretty much across the board, 40 to 60 hours. Just like, let that sink in.
Right.
These aren't people with tons of free time. They're putting in serious, demanding hours at work, often way more than 9 to 5.
Right. Long hours.
And they are still making time for intense, regular, and clearly effective exercise.
That observation right there, it just immediately throws a wrench into a common story we tell ourselves, doesn't it?
It really does.
The usual assumption is, if you work long hours, your fitness, your well-being, it just has to take a back seat. It's compromised.
Yeah, I don't have time.
Exactly. But this anecdote, it suggests something else, maybe really sophisticated time management or energy regulation, or maybe just a different way of prioritizing things that isn't just about free time.
Right.
It feels like it's not just sheer willpower. There seems to be some deeper principle going on about how these people define being locked in.
Yeah.
They seem to be integrating things, not just sacrificing one for the other.
That's a great way to put it, integration. Because the common thing we hear, or maybe even tell ourselves, is, look, I work 50 hours a week. I'm just wiped out, no energy for the gym.
Mm-hmm.
But these folks are just defying that. It makes you wonder, is it just incredible grit? Or have they figured out a way to weave work and wellness together that most of us haven't quite cracked yet?
Yeah, how do they sustain that? The energy, the focus, the discipline, not just to survive, but to actually thrive in both demanding jobs and rigorous fitness routines.
It really forces you to rethink what locking in even means. Maybe true dedication isn't just about hours logged at a desk. Maybe it's about the whole quality of life you build around that work.
And if you zoom out a bit, it really highlights how society often pushes this false choice on us, right?
Totally.
Either you're all in on your career, sacrificing everything else, or you prioritize your health and personal life, but maybe that means slowing down professionally.
Yeah, the mommy track or whatever they call it.
Right. But these examples, they show it might be about Synergy, integration, not a zero-sum game. It's not either. It's like a whole redefinition of what real dedication and effectiveness look like, maybe a more sustainable, holistic way to achieve highly.
Which leads perfectly into the core argument that the speaker makes, building right off this observation. They put forward this really compelling idea that if you're truly locked in, like genuinely productive and firing on all cylinders,
Okay.
you shouldn't just be able to maintain good sleep and regular exercise. You have to. They specifically say, thinking about those RIP guys, those people are even more locked in than the people who are sacrificing everything for work.
Wow. Okay, so that flips the script entirely. It brings up this critical point about the quality of your work versus just the sheer quantity of hours you clock in.
Exactly.
And the speaker explains the why behind it, too. The basic idea is if you get consistent, healthy sleep and you exercise regularly, the time you do spend working, it's probably going to be more productive. It's not just about grinding through exhaustion to check off tasks. It's about optimizing your brain function, your energy, your clarity, so that every hour you do work really counts more. It's about effectiveness, not just endurance.
So the real insight isn't just about showing up, it's about showing up well.
Yeah.
This just completely reframes that whole hustle culture mindset, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
We're constantly fed these stories glorifying burnout, sacrificing sleep, neglecting health, all for the sake of maximum output.
Right, the grind.
But our source here suggests this counter-narrative.
Yeah.
Maybe the true sign of dedication isn't just hours, but the sustainable energy and deep focus you bring to those hours. It's about being effective, not just busy. It's almost like an anti-hustle idea that, ironically, leads to even better results.
It really is a shift from just counting things, hours work, tasks done, to looking at the quality and the whole picture.
Yeah.
It emphasizes sustainability, overall effectiveness. It implies that if you deliberately neglect those basics, like sleep and exercise, you're actually undermining your own ability to perform at your best, even if you are putting in a ton of hours. You might be working harder, but not necessarily smarter or in a way you can keep up.
Okay, so we've got this compelling ideal, right?
Yeah.
The truly locked-in person who masterfully blends intense work with disciplined self-care. But here's where it gets really interesting, because our speaker immediately follows this up with this incredibly blunt, candid admission. I'm not following my advice.
Ah, okay.
They admit they're sleeping at weird times, going to bed way later than usual, and crucially, I'm not exercising. And they don't just state it. They describe their current state with this real self-awareness, calling it degenerative. It's degenerative.
Wow. That's incredibly relatable, isn't it? That gap between knowing what's good for you and actually doing it consistently. What's striking is the self-awareness. They don't just acknowledge it, they label it degenerative. It makes you wonder about all those factors, internal or external, that make it so hard to stick to good habits, even when you know the benefits inside out.
Yeah. Why do we struggle so much sometimes, even when we can clearly explain why we should be doing something different?
It's the million-dollar question.
We all have that voice, right? The one saying you should be doing X while our actions are taking us straight to Y. Why do we deviate so much from our own best advice? Is it just like a short-term coping thing for stress, a craving for instant gratification, or maybe it's deeper pressures, school, work, life, that just make sticking to a routine feel impossible right now?
And that repetition, it's degenerative.
Yeah.
That really hits home. It emphasizes the internal conflict, the recognition that this isn't just a temporary slip. It's a pattern that feels like it's undermining them.
Yeah, it's not accidental. It's like they know they're compromising their well-being.
Which opens up this interesting psychological question. Do our brains, when we're under a lot of pressure, sometimes cook up these narratives, maybe flawed ones, to justify behaviors that aren't really in our best interest long term?
Like a defense mechanism.
Maybe. The fact that they know it's degenerative shows deep understanding, but the struggle to change course highlights just how complex our behavior is. Even with knowledge and self-awareness, change is rarely a straight line.
That very honest personal struggle really sets the scene for understanding the speaker's really unique and complicated relationship with dopamine and exercise.
Right.
So the source details this incredibly long-standing, consistent exercise routine. They've been walking on the treadmill pretty much daily for about 4 years.
Wow, 4 years is consistent.
It is. And the thing I always do, they say, during this workout is watch YouTube. Started on a tablet, now it's on the TV downstairs. But they don't just watch it casually. They describe this whole sensory experience as literally dopamine overload.
Okay, dopamine overload. That's fascinating because exercise itself boosts dopamine naturally, makes you feel good, motivated.
Right.
But here, it's not just the exercise in isolation, it's the combination. Physical effort, high speeds, steep incline, mixed with intense, fast-paced visual and audio stimulation from YouTube, often watched at what, 1.75x speed?
Yeah, exactly. Super fast.
That combination creates this incredibly intense sensory input. So dopamine overload isn't just a casual phrase. It really captures that saturation. It could be seriously activating, maybe even kind of desensitizing those reward pathways in the brain, like hitting a sensory jackpot every single morning.
That's a great way to put it, sensory jackpot.
Yeah.
They literally say it fries my dopamine receptors. They're sizzling every morning. You get this really visceral sense of the intensity.
Yeah, wow.
And it makes you wonder, how does the brain adapt to that, to being in such a high stimulation zone constantly, especially as a daily ritual?
Right.
If you're always hitting your brain with that potent mix of physical effort and rapid-fire media, what does that do to your baseline motivation? How do your reward pathways work the rest of the day? It's almost like you're training your brain to need that constant high level of input just to feel normal or engaged.
That's a really important question about the long-term effects. While it might make the workout feel more engaging, maybe even bearable in the moment,
Sure.
it could inadvertently condition the brain to crave that constant external stimulation. And that could make it harder to focus or find satisfaction or just settle into quieter activities later on. You create this internal pressure for more input, always.
But then there's this huge, mostly unseen factor that critically limits the intensity of their exercise,
Yeah.
even though they seem to crave that intensity.
Yeah. Okay.
The speaker shares, quite bravely, that they have a specific medical condition, cholinergic urticaria.
Okay. Cholinergic urticaria.
Yeah, they describe it meticulously. It's basically an allergy to your own sweat, triggered when your body temp rises. And the result sounds awful. Their body gets all red, covered in hives, intensely unbearably itchy. And it's compounded by eczema, so they have pretty bad skin issues overall. Because of this, they just cannot do super intense exercise.
Wow. That introduces such a significant challenge, one that's often overlooked when we talk about fitness goals.
Yeah.
For so many, exercise is about pushing limits, sweating it out.
Oh, right.
But when you face a physical limitation like that, something non-negotiable, your whole approach has to change fundamentally. It's not about willpower. It's a direct physiological barrier.
Exactly.
And it's actually remarkable how they adapt. They mention using lots of fans pointing at me during exercise to manage body temperature and minimize sweating. That ingenuity shows real commitment despite the obstacle.
It really does. It just perfectly illustrates how someone can have a clear goal exercise, be healthy,
Right.
but their own body becomes this complex barrier to the usual methods.
Right.
It turns exercise from something straightforward into this delicate balancing act. You have to wonder about the psychological side, too. Wanting to push yourself hard physically, feeling that potential, but being fundamentally unable to because of a chronic, uncomfortable, unpredictable condition.
Yeah, that must be incredibly frustrating.
It has to shape how you see your own potential, your relationship with your body, how you even approach fitness. It's like this constant, difficult negotiation with your own biology.
And it forces us to have a more nuanced definition of exercise, doesn't it? It's not always about high-intensity, sweat-soaked workouts.
Point.
For someone with cholinergic urticaria, the focus shifts completely. It's about carefully managing the body's internal state, finding a sustainable path that avoids triggering severe reactions. It reminds us that one size fits all just doesn't work for health.
And this limitation totally changed the experience of the exercise itself. The speaker contrasts their current reality with the past, back when they could run intensely. They describe the runner's high so vividly. They talk about getting super tunnel visioned, how everything kind of goes in slow motion, your body is at power, just this really astonishing feeling. But then this is key, that stress, it only happens under intense activity.
That distinction is crucial. The runner's high sounds like this deep, internal, almost meditative experience, right? A mind-body connection where the outside world fades away. It's rewarding in itself.
Exactly.
But the speaker's current situation, because they can't do intense exercise, means they are, in their words, almost always very focused on what I'm doing, like what's in front of me on YouTube. The focus is external, stimulated, dependent on that sensory input.
So instead of that amazing internal self-generated feeling, they're relying on external stuff, YouTube videos, to stay engaged, motivated, maybe even just distracted from the discomfort. Does that lack of the runner's high, that missing internal reward, actually drive the need for more external stimulation during the workout? Is the brain trying to compensate for the missing internal focus by demanding this constant sensory feed from the screen?
That's a fascinating possibility. It touches on the brain's adaptability and its drive for reward. If internal rewards are limited or less accessible due to physical constraints, do we naturally lean towards readily available external ones?
Makes sense.
And what does that mean for our ability to cultivate motivation from within in other areas if we get used to needing external input for engagement and reward? It's a subtle shift, but it could have big long-term effects on attention and satisfaction.
And this reliance on constant external stimulation during the workout leads to this really jarring experience afterwards. The speaker describes it so well. I get upstairs and then it's silent. And it's like, oh, yeah, that's a little scary, right?
Wow, scary.
Yeah. Imagine that sudden, stark quiet after the noise speed. The treadmill thumping, the fan whirring, the air filter humming, YouTube blaring at 1.75x speed, even with noise-canceling headphones on. The silence must feel absolutely deafening.
That really highlights sensory adaptation and what happens when the stimulation suddenly stops that rebound effect, or sensory withdrawal.
Right.
Your brain adapts to that high level of input, so when it abruptly ceases, there's this dramatic drop. It's more than just quiet, it's the absence of overwhelming data. Like, stepping from bright sunlight into a dark room, your senses need time to readjust. That sudden shift can absolutely feel unsettling, disorienting, even scary.
That sudden quiet after basically a sensory assault must feel like a vacuum. What are the long-term effects of doing that day after day, constantly exposing yourself to that much simultaneous sensory input?
Yeah. Does it train the brain to always expect, maybe even crave, constant stimulation? Does it make moments of quiet, stillness, or just mundane tasks feel inherently uncomfortable, boring, or scary?
It feels like you could raise your threshold, like you need more and more external input just to feel on or engaged, a constant ratcheting up.
And it raises a critical question about our modern high-stimulus lives in general. Does constantly bombarding our brains with external data gradually reduce our capacity for internal reflection, deep thought, or just quiet contemplation? Are we losing our inner quiet?
And this need for stimulation, this sort of ingrained need for a dopamine bridge to keep that heightened state going, it definitely extends beyond the treadmill.
Okay.
The speaker describes this past coping mechanism, almost automatic. I would just transition that sort of baseline dopamine feed from the treadmill to my phone, immediately grabbing their device to listen to podcasts or, surprise, surprise, more YouTube videos.
That's such a perfect description of a habit loop, and one that's so common now with our devices always there.
Totally.
The intense workout creates a specific brain state, and the brain, wanting to keep that going and avoid the sudden drop, immediately looks to fill the gap. Phones, with their endless content streams, are just super convenient ways to continue that data flow, essentially extending the workout's sensory habit.
It's incredibly relatable, isn't it? How often do we just reflexively reach for our phones? Maybe unconsciously, not for anything specific, but just to avoid quiet or fill boredom or bridge that gap after something stimulating. It's like the brain gets revved up and just doesn't want to power down. The phone is the quickest fix to avoid that feeling of empty silence, like a digital pacifier for an overstimulated mind.
And it makes you question how often we use our devices, not intentionally, but just as this constant background noise, this stream of input to stop our minds from settling down. What's the real cost of that constant engagement?
But then here's this moment of real, intentional action and a big shift in behavior from the source. The speaker talks about making a conscious choice recently. I don't have the YouTube app on my phone anymore.
Oh, interesting. Deliberate action.
Yeah, and the reason it's so relatable, they noticed a lot of my time was spent looking for the right YouTube video to listen to while I do tours, like making my bed, instead of actually doing the things I needed to do.
Ah, the paradox of choice paralyzing action.
Exactly. So now, more intentionally, they usually listen to music or a video that I downloaded on my computer during those transition times.
That is such a powerful example of using friction to break a habit. Just removing the app, even though the content is still technically there via a browser, adds that little bit of extra effort.
Right.
And that friction can dramatically reduce impulsive or compulsive use. It shows real self-awareness about wasting time and a deliberate move towards more intentionality, prioritizing doing stuff over just consuming stuff. It's a strategic choice.
It's a huge step. And it really makes you look critically at how apps are designed, right? They're built to minimize friction, maximize engagement, often leading to that endless scrolling.
Absolutely, that's the business model.
So is managing our digital lives just about willpower? Or is it more about smartly designing our own environment, including our digital one, to support our goals instead of undermining them? This example really shows someone taking back control in a world designed for constant absorption.
It really speaks to personal agency, doesn't it? Are we just passively accepting how apps are designed, letting algorithms dictate our behavior? Or can we, and should we, actively shape our digital spaces to align with our values, our goals, our well-being? That decision to delete the app is a clear act of reclaiming that agency. It shows mindful restriction can actually be liberating.
Okay, but now, despite that impressive self-regulation, we hit this really fascinating kind of contradictory snag in the speaker's thinking. They reveal what they thought was this clever reason for not exercising lately, a theory they admit right away is wrong and not true.
Okay, intrigue builds.
Their misguided idea was an attempt to set my baseline level of dopamine at a very low point at the beginning of the day.
A self-imposed dopamine fast.
Kind of.
Mm.
The belief was by skipping this super stimulating morning workout, they'd be able to focus harder later in the silence. But they even acknowledge, with impressive self-correction, that the real science on dopamine detoxes is iffy, and it's more of a long-term type thing. Definitely not something you achieve just by skipping one workout.
Yeah, that's a classic example of how these pop science concepts like dopamine detox get oversimplified and misapplied.
Right.
While reducing constant overwhelming stimulation can be good for focus, a quick reactive fix like skipping one workout, especially if you're also sleep deprived, isn't going to magically reset complex brain chemistry.
No quick fixes.
Exactly. And the speaker's self-correction is key here. I think that's wrong because I get distracted just as easily. That moment of honest reflection shows they eventually saw through the flawed reasoning.
So you have this mix of real self-awareness alongside this subtle self-deception happening. Why do we do that? Why do we grab onto quick fixes or try to rationalize behaviors that aren't helping us using these pseudoscientific ideas?
It's like the brain needs a coherent story for our actions, even if the story isn't quite right or just covers up simpler truths.
Yeah, you want to believe there's some clever strategy behind it, a neurohack. Even if it's really just procrastination or habit or the pressure of a deadline making you act differently. We try to make our choices feel significant even if we have to invent the significance.
It speaks to that deep human need for control and explanation, doesn't it?
Yeah.
We seem to prefer a flawed explanation over no explanation at all, especially if that story conveniently lets us off the hook for deviating from a healthier habit. It's about making meaning, even if it's a bit self-serving short-term.
But even though that dopamine detox reasoning was flawed, the speaker does think something else is happening, something more psychological, maybe less chemical.
Okay.
They articulate this really fascinating, almost mystical belief that not exercising and going to bed later changes something in my brain that says that something is different and that the thing that is different is that I need to get a lot of schoolwork done.
Associating the disruption with urgency.
Exactly. Can point to the proof. Finishing one paper today, planning technical work for tomorrow, all to pass their last quarter, and, crucially, graduate. They even sum it up beautifully, if casually.
Yeah.
It's the vibe, man.
It's the vibe. I love that. It highlights this amazing psychological thing where even if the initial reason for changing behavior is wrong, the changes themselves, even negative ones like losing sleep or skipping exercise, can get powerfully linked to a higher purpose or a sense of urgency.
Yeah.
Is it a genuine, weird, motivational trigger, like the body's discomfort signals an emergency redirecting energy? Or is it just a clever way to rationalize breaking good habits, creating a story that justifies the struggle by tying it to this massive necessary goal?
Yeah.
It's a great example of how our internal stories shape our actions.
That vibe, that feeling, it's so compelling, right? And it makes you think about how we build these narratives to justify what we're doing, especially when our actions seem to contradict our stated goals, like being healthy. It's like the brain goes, okay, routine's out the window, I feel off kilter. This must mean I'm laser focused on this other super important thing. It's a very human, maybe illogical way to connect the dots. And the pressure of it being the last quarter, needing to graduate, it's obviously a huge, almost desperate motivator that can just override healthier impulses.
It really shows the power of self-narrative. Whether the dopamine theory was right or wrong doesn't even matter if the person believes that this altered state, even an uncomfortable one, is necessary for a critical outcome. That belief itself becomes this incredibly strong driver.
Yeah.
It's a reminder that motivation isn't always logical or evidence-based. Often, it's profoundly shaped by the stories we tell ourselves about why we're doing what we're doing.
Okay, so stepping back a bit from the intense focus on productivity, dopamine, digital habits, the source material also gives us these really nice grounding, almost mundane little snapshots of the speaker's everyday life.
Right, the daily texture.
Yeah, they give specifics about breakfast.
Yeah,
Steak and a banana and a yogurt and some cheese. Pretty hearty.
you're not bad.
And dinner sounds quite refined for a busy student.
Mm.
Palm's lunch, essentially a charcuterie plate.
Fancy.
Right. And amidst all this, the academic grind is clearly still happening. They finished some schoolwork today this morning and are planning out the next steps. All of my history work done today and technical work tomorrow.
And while those details might seem small, they're actually really important, I think. They anchor this whole deep dive in a relatable reality.
Yeah, it makes it real.
It reminds us that these big abstract discussions about optimizing life and well-being aren't just theoretical. They're happening within the context of someone's actual day-to-day existence, with meals, chores, school pressures. It shows how daily routines, the food that fuels you, the academic work that challenges you, provide this essential practical framework for a mind that's also grappling with these big questions.
It really does paint a fuller picture.
Yeah.
It shows that even while someone's wrestling with big ideas, internal contradictions, managing health issues, they're still doing the practical stuff. Making breakfast, eating dinner, getting schoolwork done. It kind of normalizes the struggle and shows how these grand theories and internal debates always intersect with the small, practical, often repetitive parts of just living. Even big questions have to deal with needing to eat and meet deadlines.
And it makes you think about the function of routine itself. How do those small, consistent rituals, the specific breakfast, the structured approach to homework, maybe provide this crucial stability when you're also deep in the messy pursuit of big goals and self-improvement? They're like anchors in the present moment.
From those grounding daily details, the conversation takes this sharp but really fascinating turn towards a very specific passion.
Oh, okay.
Our speaker gets super excited talking about getting the 4K Blu-ray of The Zone of Interest. They mentioned seeing this striking image on the cover, a woman covered in blood, which grabbed their attention.
A provocative cover.
Totally. Then they decided to buy the 4K Blu-ray after hearing the film critic Karsten Runquist call it a Holocaust movie, and significantly, a movie that he thinks people are going to be talking about for a long time.
High praise.
And here's the real kicker, showing their commitment to the experience. They deliberately chose to go in blind, as advised, knowing only a basic 2-sentence plot synopsis.
Going in blind. That's increasingly rare. And it's fascinating because it touches on the huge, maybe undervalued impact of experiencing a film that way, especially something heavy like this sounds.
Right.
In our world of spoilers, trailers revealing everything, endless reviews online, actively choosing to not know can totally change the experience. It lets the film speak for itself without your preconceived ideas or other people's reactions coloring that first raw impact. It's a pure encounter with the art.
It really feels like an act of cinematic purism, doesn't it? In a world where everyone knows everything instantly, preserving that untouched first viewing feels almost rebellious.
It kind of is.
It's about letting the movie wash over you, letting the story and emotion hit you directly, unmediated. The fact they specifically mentioned knowing only 2 sentences just highlights that commitment to a fresh encounter. It feels valuable, choosing that in our over-informed world.
And it makes you wonder about our broader media habits. Are we too quick to consume the summary, the review, the hot take, instead of engaging in the sometimes more challenging but maybe more rewarding experience of discovering something for ourselves?
Good question.
The speaker's choice here suggests a real preference for discovery, highlighting how powerful art can be when it unfolds organically, without that filter of external opinion. It encourages a deeper, more personal connection.
And this specific choice about how to watch the film then naturally flows into this broader, really passionate discussion about the medium itself, how we consume media.
Ah, the physical versus streaming debate.
Exactly. Our speaker expresses this really strong preference for physical media, especially around movies. They contrast it, almost humorously, with their parents who only do is stream media.
The generational divide.
Totally. And they pose this really sharp rhetorical question. You can feel the frustration. What's the point in getting a very expensive 4K old television if you're not going to, watch a real 4K movies on it, if you're watching a streamed 4K movie, right? That's just as good as 1080p.
Ouch. Strong words.
Right. And then they lament seeing specific visual flaws, like color banding on the gradients.
Okay, so they're getting technical. This is a purist argument, really, about quality versus compression. The speaker, clearly someone who cares about visual fidelity, is arguing that real 4K from a Blu-ray isn't just different, it's better than streamed 4K, especially if you have a good eye or a good setup.
Yeah.
They're pointing to data compression and how it affects the image color banding on the gradients. For anyone listening, imagine a smooth sunset on screen. Instead of a perfect blend of colors, you see these distinct, ugly blocks or bands of color.
Right. Ruins the effect.
Exactly. That's banding. It's a sign the video data was heavily compressed to stream easily. Those subtle details, the smooth transitions in light and color, they get lost.
You can almost feel the speaker's pain. They even joke about it being a rhetorical suicide request when talking about their parents streaming. It makes you stop and think, is this just a niche thing for AV nerds? Or is there a wider, maybe growing pushback against the compromises of streaming as people realize what they might be missing? What does this whole debate say about how much we value artistic integrity or getting the most out of the tech we buy? For some, it's clearly not just about watching the movie, it's about experiencing it as purely as possible, exactly as intended.
It raises that big question about convenience versus quality. Streaming is undeniably easy, instant access to everything.
Too easy.
But what's the potential cost? To the visual fidelity, the audio quality, the artist's intended presentation? Are we unconsciously trading a richer, more immersive, more authentic experience for the sake of instant gratification in our media habits? It's a trade-off we rarely think about, but it deeply impacts how we engage with art. Hashtag outro.
And that, listener, brings us toward the end of this really, really insightful deep dive. We've kind of journeyed through this very candid personal story, exploring what locked in might truly mean today, way beyond just work hours, into this whole idea of holistic well-being.
Yeah.
Then we got into that complex, sometimes contradictory dance between dopamine, serious physical limitations, and our daily habits, seeing how external stimulation shapes our internal world, our focus.
And how hard it is to manage.
Exactly. And finally, we touched on those deliberate, sometimes really passionate choices we make about how we consume information and media, from deleting apps to arguing for the purity of physical film.
And going through one person's struggles and insights like this, it really highlights why it matters for you listening. It's kind of an invitation to maybe recognize your own patterns.
Yeah.
You know, your sleep habits, how you approach exercise, your relationship with technology. It's about getting that self-awareness and then maybe making more intentional choices for your own well-being. Not about being perfect, but just that ongoing process of noticing and adjusting.
Totally. And when you connect these individual struggles to the bigger trends, information overload, the constant push for efficiency, our collective search for genuine well-being in this super high stimulus world,
Right.
you see, these aren't just personal quirks. They're kind of universal challenges, shared human experiences that really deserve our attention and conscious effort.
It really boils down to that fundamental question.
Yeah.
How do we navigate this world that's always pushing for more, faster, instant everything, while also trying to find sustainable well-being, real focus, and a genuine sense of fulfillment? It's such a balancing act.
It really is. So as you think about everything we've unpacked today, maybe take a moment to consider this. In this world constantly nudging us toward more, faster, now, what does a truly productive and fulfilling life actually look like for you? What uncomfortable truths about your own habits, maybe around sleep or exercise or how you use your phone, might be kind of holding you back from that deeper fulfillment? And maybe most importantly, how do you personally balance that drive to achieve that external productivity push with the fundamental need for sustainable well-being? Recognizing how much your daily choices around exercise, sleep, and media really shape that delicate, ongoing balance.
Lots to think about there.
Definitely. Thanks for diving deep with us today.